We stand on a coastline at dusk, watching ships burn on the horizon. Entire kingdoms, once confident, wealthy, seemingly eternal, are collapsing in real time. And we are left with a question that feels uncomfortably modern. What happens when a network of nations so interconnected, so specialized, so dependent on shared stability, suddenly fractures? And here's the counterintuitive truth. It wasn't a single enemy that brought it down. It was the fragility of systems that seemed unbreakable. Welcome back to Nations and Notions, where we journey through the rise, fall, and psychological heartbeat of civilizations. Today, we're stepping into a world that feels both ancient and uncannily familiar. The Eastern Mediterranean of the Late Bronze Age, a world of palatial diplomacy, long-distance trade, chariot warfare, and a cultural interconnectedness that rivals our own globalized age. Together, we're going to explore the great rupture between 1200 and 1150 BC, a crisis remembered in Egyptian inscriptions, Greek legends, and archaeological scars. We'll trace how this international system fell apart and how a mysterious, migrating confederation we call the Sea Peoples became both a symptom and a symbol of the collapse. But this isn't just a story about destruction. It's a story about identity, legitimacy, institutional integrity, and the limits of national strength. It's about what societies choose, morally and politically, when catastrophe arrives at their shores. And most of all, it's about how a civilization's collective mindset can shift in a single generation. As we travel through palaces, ruined cities, shipwrecks, and battle inscriptions, we'll uncover not only what happened, but what it meant and still means for how nations survive crisis, rebuild trust, and rise again from the ashes. So let's begin our journey at the height of a world that believed itself unshakable. The Bronze Age before the fall. We start in the Late Bronze Age, around 1300 BC, when the Eastern Mediterranean was a vibrant geopolitical web. From Mycenaean Greece to Hatti and Anatolia, from Canaan to Egypt's New Kingdom, we walk through a world defined by palatial power, sophisticated bureaucracy, and international diplomacy. As we move through Mycenaean halls lit by oil lamps, we feel the hum of a well-oiled system. Scribes record shipments of tin and copper, the bloodline of bronze, the metal that defines the era. Ships crisscross the sea, carrying Cypriot copper, Levantine timber, Egyptian grain, and luxury goods that symbolized legitimacy and status. Palaces aren't just buildings, they are institutions, and they radiate authority. Their archives bind kings to one another through treaties, marriages, and letters, some written in Akkadian, the diplomatic lingua franca. Together, these states form what historians call the Bronze Age international system, a network so interdependent that its collapse would be catastrophic. As we move through those Mycenaean halls, unaware of the approaching storm, we can already sense the tension. Complex systems create extraordinary strength until they break. Before the Sea Peoples arrive, the world is already trembling. Around 1250 to 1200 BC, we begin to feel the ground shift beneath us. Letters between kings grow anxious. Grain shortages, rebellions among vassal states, and internal political fractures weaken the palatial order. We move north into the Hittite Empire, where the once dominant kingdom of Hatti faces pressure from rival states and internal strife. Carchemish struggles to maintain autonomy. Vassal kings argue that they cannot send troops. Their own lands are starving. To the west, Mycenaean Greece sees palace rivalries intensify. an era that later Greek tradition would mythologize in stories like the Trojan War. To the east, Canaanite city-states face droughts and political upheaval. Nomadic groups move across the landscape, seeking new pastures and safety. And in Egypt, Ramesses II's successors inherit a kingdom showing signs of strain. Grain prices fluctuate, foreign expeditions fail, and once stable borderlands grow restless. The collapse wasn't sudden. It unfolded over decades, slow enough to normalize instability, but fast enough to overwhelm fragile institutions. And then the migrations begin. Across the Mediterranean, groups of displaced peoples, some from the Aegean, some perhaps from Western Anatolia, others from regions now lost to history, begin moving by land and sea. They are not a single unified army, but a patchwork of families, warriors, farmers, artisans, and refugees. The term Sea Peoples is our modern label, based on Egyptian records, but these were almost certainly multiple groups with different origins and motives. As we sail with them, we feel the desperation that emerges when legitimacy fails, when leaders cannot provide security, when crisis recovery seems impossible. Some groups seek new lands, others raid for survival, others follow charismatic war leaders promising a better future. And it is in these turbulent migrations that we discover something crucial. The Sea Peoples weren't simply invaders, they were also the human face of a broken world order. The collapse arrives. This is the moment everything changes. The fall of cities. We walk through the ruins of once mighty cities, Ugarit, Hattusa, Mycenae, and many others, charred, abandoned, or violently destroyed. Archaeologists later find arrowheads embedded in walls, signs of sudden abandonment, storehouses of grain left uneaten. But the destruction is inconsistent. Some cities burn, others are simply deserted, others survive intact. This patchwork reveals a deeper truth. The Sea Peoples didn't act alone. Multiple crises overlapped: climate change, systemic economic failure, internal revolts, and external migrations, all feeding one another. The Sea Peoples were both agents and symbols of collapse, but the roots lay deeper. The Egyptian perspective. We arrive in Egypt under Pharaoh Ramesses III, around 1177 BC. On the walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, he declares victory over a coalition of sea peoples who attacked Egypt by land and sea. His inscriptions depict ships locked in fierce battle, warriors hurling spears, women and children following the migrating groups. But even in victory, Egypt is changed. The empire contracts. Foreign colonies are lost, resources thin. The once expansive new kingdom becomes defensive, cautious, inward-looking. Despite being the only major power to repel the Sea Peoples, Egypt still entered a long decline afterward, winning the battle, but losing the world around it. The human story. As we stand on those shattered coastlines, we see the human dimension more clearly. This isn't just geopolitical collapse, it's societal disorientation. People lose trust in institutions that once guaranteed order. Traditional elites lose credibility. Palaces, symbols of power, become tombs of a vanished system. We feel the political psychology of collapse. Fear, displacement, improvisation, and moral choices made under pressure. And yet, amidst the chaos, something remarkable happens. New societies emerge from the rubble. The Philistines, one of the Sea Peoples' confederations, settle along the southern Levantine coast, creating cities like Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gaza. They developed distinct pottery, architecture, and governance. Their integration into the region reshaped Iron Age politics. In the highlands of Canaan, small settlements begin to grow, communities that will eventually form the early Israelites. In Anatolia, instead of one empire, multiple smaller states emerge. In Greece, a centuries-long Dark Age gives way to the later rise of classical civilization. Out of the collapse of Bronze Age monarchies emerged the social foundations that would eventually produce democracy in Greece and prophetic movements in Israel. The world doesn't simply end, it resets. What the Sea Peoples left behind. As we look at the long arc of history, the late Bronze Age collapse becomes more than a dramatic event. It becomes a lesson in systems, resilience, and the consequences of fragility. Institutional integrity and national strength. The Bronze Age showed how prosperity could hide structural weaknesses. Palaces had wealth, but lacked flexibility. Their power relied on external trade and internal compliance, two things they couldn't guarantee in crisis. Their failure wasn't due to weakness, but due to over-optimization. They were built for stability, not adaptation. Moral choices under pressure. When the Sea Peoples migrated, societies faced moral dilemmas we understand today. Do we close borders or negotiate? Do we prioritize military strength or humanitarian response? Do we reform our institutions or cling to the old order? Most Bronze Age states chose rigidity over reform until they could no longer choose at all. Societal cohesion. The collapse revealed an essential truth. Cohesion matters more than complexity. Small, flexible communities survived better than old imperial giants. Crisis recovery and collective mindset. Recovery required new mindsets, more local, more communal, less dependent on palace elites. These shifts laid the groundwork for Iron Age innovation, alphabet writing, new religious ideas, new forms of governance. The alphabet used in English today ultimately came from post-collapse Canaanite scripts that simplified earlier writing systems for a changed world. The Sea Peoples, though mysterious and often vilified, were part of this transition. They were agents of disruption, yes, but also participants in rebuilding. As we step back from this world of burning cities and shifting coastlines, we recognize why the late Bronze Age collapse continues to resonate. It wasn't just an ancient crisis, it was a crisis of interconnectedness, institutional integrity, and collective psychology. A world that believed itself stable discovered that stability is not the same as resilience. A network of nations learned that legitimacy cannot rely solely on wealth or tradition. It requires adaptability, trust, and the capacity to make moral choices even under strain. The Sea Peoples dramatize the fear of the unknown, the outsider who arrives in a moment of weakness. But they also represent the reality that migration, displacement, and cultural blending are recurring patterns in human history. They force us to ask how societies respond to upheaval, with rigidity or reform, isolation or cooperation. The collapse of 1200 BC reminds us that civilizations fall not only when their enemies attack, but when their internal structures can no longer absorb shock. And yet, it also shows us that from crisis comes reinvention. New cultures, new scripts, new forms of governance. Much of the Iron Age world, and therefore our own, was born from this era of turmoil. So as we look at our own interconnected world, the late Bronze Age collapse offers a quiet, cautionary wisdom. Strength comes not from complexity alone, but from flexibility. Legitimacy must be renewed, not assumed. And resilience is built long before crisis arrives. Thank you for journeying with us. If this story moved you, or made you think differently about national strength, crisis recovery, and the long arc of human resilience, consider joining the conversation below. Until next time, we'll keep exploring how nations rise, fall, and find meaning in the spaces between.